when the world is crap and you've got the blues, just take a break from all that horrible news for something crazy, amazingly clever, and never half-assed. Except when it is. Yes, it's the Randy Rainbow Podcast. This song is almost over, girl, so wipe your tears. You're in for a treat, and feast your ears on this remarkable feat. Yes, it's a famous celebrity finally podcasting at last. This shit is revolutionary. Randy Rainbow's Podcast. The Randy Rainbow Podcast. Hey girl, welcome to episode 3 of the Randy Rainbow Podcast. And you said we wouldn't last. How dare you? Anyway, I'm so happy to be back with you. We have a very, very exciting show. There is this intro on the Judy Garland show. And if you're a real Judy Garland / Barbra Streisand homosexual like I am, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. You can, of course, find the video on YouTube, but I know it from the Barbra Streisand box set from the 90s called Just for the Record. And it's the intro from the Judy Garland show. You know, they would write lyrics for the intro song specific to each guest on the Judy Garland program. We try to do our version of that at the end of this podcast. We write little special tags for the guest. It's kind of an homage to Judy, as is everything I do. But this particular intro went, she said, we've got a very exciting show planned for you tonight. We have marvelous people. We've got Barbra Streisand. I think she's nice, and she has such poise, and she's got such elegance. It's a joy to have her on my show. I just love that they rhymed nice and with Streisand. Isn't that fabulous? Oh, did you like my Judy impression? It's all right. I'm working on it. And we do have a very exciting show planned. And our guest is indeed marvelous and someone who I have known and loved for a very long time since, there's a discrepancy, as you'll come to hear, about when we actually met. Every time he tells the story, we get younger. He thinks we met in utero, but in fact, we met when we were about 10 or 11 years old at a musical theater summer camp in Hollywood, Florida, called the Hollywood Playhouse. And he's since gone on to do a couple things like be Tony nominated for the Book of Mormon and star as the voice of Olaf in Frozen, I believe it's called. But his greatest achievement to date has been guesting on my first full-length studio album called A Little Brains, A Little Talent, available now wherever fine music is sold or streamed. And if you haven't yet, you must. Not only did I get to sing with Josh Gad on that, but we did a trio with another veteran of the Randy Rainbow Podcast, Sean Hayes. And can you believe we did a version of You Gotta Get a Gimmick from Gypsy? You know, the 3 strippers? We kind of did a little gender-bent version of that. So pick up a copy today, won't you? Marvelous, very exciting show planned for you. So Josh will be here very soon. And in the meantime, why don't we take some calls from you, the audience? And I'll just remind you, if you would like to call in and leave me a voicemail, ask me a question about absolutely anything. It can be about me. It can be about you. Of course, I prefer questions about me. Go right ahead and go crazy. If you'd like to maybe ask me out. I really have this dream where we do a segment at some point a little later in the podcast where I go out on some dates here in New York, if you're local. Or maybe when I'm out on tour, we can record some dates around the country. Is this a horrible idea? Am I getting myself into trouble? I don't know. I think it would be fun. We've got Barbra Streisand. Anyway, go ahead and leave me a voicemail by clicking on the link in the show notes, just like these fine people did. Hit it. It's the Randy Rainbow Podcast. Let's answer the phone. Pick up.
Hi, Randy. This is Helen in Carlsbad, California. When did you first realize that you are a fashion icon?
Hi, Helen. Aren't you darling? Well, of course, I've never considered myself a fashion icon. I am one, obviously, but I've never considered myself one. That would be egotistical. To be honest, fashion has never been my thing, really. And I think I do, in the videos, I do a nice enough job with my costuming. People always ask me, who does your costuming? And I tell them it's a very fancy designer out of France called a Maison Primée, also pronounced Amazon Prime. It's no secret that the costumes I use in my videos are all really just slutty Halloween costumes. I have kicked up my tour costumes a notch. And I have a fabulous designer. I actually do have a designer who does all the drag queens and me, and his name is David Dalrymple. And he designs all of these wonderful, sparkly suits for me. But that fashion has never really been my thing, to be honest with you. It's just something that I'm actually starting to now experiment with and have a little more fun with. But hey, if Helen says I'm a fashion icon, who am I to argue with Helen? Thanks, girl.
Hi, Randy. My name is Sarah, and I'm an author out in California. I really enjoyed listening to your memoir as an audiobook. It was fabulous, and it helped me get through a recent illness. Anyway, I know from the memoir that you grew up partly in Florida. My question for you, did you watch the 1990s all-new Mickey Mouse Club that filmed in Orlando for the Disney Channel? And if so, whose subsequent career are you or were you most invested in? Your choices are Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, Justin Timberlake, Ryan Gosling, Kerry Russell, Dale Godboldo, or Rona Bennett. Thanks so much.
Sarah, you know I don't like to get political. Oh my God, this is a rough question. I appreciate Sarah for giving me multiple choice. This woman is prepared. Okay. First of all, I was not that into the 1990s Mickey Mouse Club. I don't think I watched it maybe, twice. As a much younger kid, I was more interested in the reruns of the original Mickey Mouse Club, like with Annette and Cubby and, the OGs. To answer your question, I'm avoiding answering the question because, if I say Britney, I'm going to hear from the Christina people. And if I say Christina, there's no telling what might happen to me once the Britney people catch wind of it. But I was genuinely equal parts Britney and Christina. In fact, my very first parody video that I ever did in high school, it might still be on YouTube. Oh shit, I shouldn't even tell you that because then you'll find it. But the first video I did, and I wrote about this in my memoir, thanks for listening, was a parody version. Well, it wasn't a parody. It was just a kind of a shot-by-shot recreation of the Oops, I Did It Again video. So I was always big into Britney, that's for sure. These days, though, I'd say my interests lie more in Ryan Gosling, for obvious reasons. Actually, as I'm recording this, I'm looking at this poster that I have in my studio of a World AIDS Day event I did at the Forum in LA just a few months ago that was headlined by Christina Aguilera and Jennifer Hudson, and I hosted it. I was next door to Christina Aguilera's dressing room. And it was really fun to share a stage with her, and I'd do it again anytime. But Jennifer Hudson took a picture with me. That's all I'm saying.
Hey Randy, I'm a huge fan of yours. I would like to know a little bit more about the process of how you write these genius parodies. I would assume that you choose the song first and then the lyrics. Could you explain that a little bit? Keep up the great work.
Thank you very much for the question. I would say that my parody writing process varies from song to song. Generally speaking, I do come up with the song first. That's usually the first thing to pop in my head. That's the easiest part usually because, as I've said before, I naturally think in show tunes. And whenever anything happens in my life or on the news, it's always been my first instinct to find the musical theater parallel to that situation. It's a gay coping mechanism. I will draw inspiration for the parodies from various locations. Sometimes fans will tweet me ideas. In fact, there have been quite a few of my greatest hits that have come from you, the viewers. The one off the top of my head is Alternative Facts, the one that I did a few years ago as an homage to Kellyanne Conway. You should pardon the expression. I had finished a parody version of a song called Little Known Facts from the musical You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, which is a much lesser known song. That was to be my Kellyanne Conway send-up. And right after I finished recording it, I saw a tweet from someone saying, you should use Jellicle Cats and make it Alternative Facts. Jellicle Cats, of course, from Cats. And I said, shit, I have to get back into the studio now and re-record that whole thing. And I did. And it ended up being a huge hit. And in fact, Andrew Lloyd Webber saw it and invited me to his birthday party. I wasn't able to go. I was on tour, damn it. But yeah, that was a hit. Now, you know how I hate to plug my New York Times best-selling memoir, Playing With Myself. I think I've mentioned it 9 times this episode. But I'd mention it only because there's an entire chapter, if you are actually interested in my process, called It's Not Easy Being Green Screen. And it goes through step by step, I believe 10 easy steps on how to make a Randy Rainbow video. So pick up a copy today. Or don't, whatever. It's the Randy Rainbow Podcast Variety Show. And now a quick word from our sponsor. Hello, friends. Randy Rainbow here. And if anyone knows about having flawless skin, it's moi. But not everyone is so lucky. Most need a little help. Well, that's where Uncle Mitch comes in. From the Senate floor to your front door, it's Itchy Mitch Face and Neck Cream. Elements like the sun, aging, or lacking a soul can take a toll on one's physical appearance. Skin can become flaky and irritated, giving elderly Caucasian skin that blotchy and irritated look of a recently shaved hamster. That's why Uncle Mitch McConnell passed Senate Bill DB 3178562 shrugging girl emoji, allowing for the testing of highly chemicalized lotions on the majestic Galapagos tortoise. By doing so, we've not only developed a product specifically designed to lessen that Yertle the Turtle look, but we've reduced the invasive tortoise species population by half, impacting both your skin and the environment. Itchy Mitch Face and Neck Cream blocks harmful rays from the sun like a bill to protect school kids from gun violence. It's that effective. Give your skin the strength your character lacks. It's Itchy Mitch Face and Neck Cream. Order now. That was really a kick, but enough of that skit. Time to drop all the shit now. So let's cut the shit. I think a fabulous Kiki with someone I love would be best. It's time for a guest. Josh, thank you so much for being on my podcast.
I didn't have a choice. Based on our friendship, our long friendship, the only way that that you would still speak to me is if I did your podcast. So I did it.
I might not even, depending on how this goes. So
right.
Thank you for taking a risk. Tell everybody how we know each other. Do you remember? You always get the story wrong. I know you think we met in the womb.
I remember it vividly. We met when we were 2 years old.
We were like 11 years old. Josh thinks we were in utero.
In Chabad together, a Chabad house.
That's not how it went.
And you were very religious, and I
had to pay us.
Almost like Yentl wanted to rescue you. No, so you and I met. There's a discrepancy here because I think we were 10 or 9. You believe we were 11. I'm right. You're wrong. It's all fine. And the two of us, my mother, who you just spoke to.
Yeah.
Who's like, Randy, it's so good to see you.
She's so Jewish. I love her.
I love her. So she found this place in an ad in a newspaper. Back when we were growing up, they had newspapers and you would find ads in them. And she said, there's this children's playhouse called the Hollywood Playhouse, and I think you should go. Yeah, I know you love performing. And she did it. And the first thing I did was something called How to Eat Like a Child, which is apropos. And it was at that children's playhouse in Hollywood, Florida, that we fatefully met anywhere between 9 and 11. And then you and I did a number of shows together.
This is where the discrepancy happens. You were there before I was there, and you did the original Hollywood Playhouse cast of How to Eat Like a Child. I would later do the revival and get rave reviews.
Here's what's so crazy. I don't even remember that there was a revival.
You've been through a lot since then. It's okay.
So this is like the OG Will and Grace kind of thing. Like it was just sort of like, there was like a reboot of the original.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. And the reboot had me in it, and it was much more.
So it's different than Will and Grace, but yeah, go on.
It's better. But anyway, that we had parallel stories, and I write about it in my new book, available now wherever books are sold. Mm-hmm. My mother found an ad on a windshield wiper because she had taken me to ballet, because I was a ballerina on Long Island, and we moved to Florida. I didn't know what the hell to do with myself. I tried some ballet lessons. None of them were suitable. And we walked outside one day, and she found on her windshield an ad for the Hollywood Playhouse. And she said, much like your mother, I know you like to do theater. Our mothers are Fran Drescher, both of them, by the way. But the funny thing is that, because now, of course, they still stay in touch. And my mother says to me constantly, and I've said this to you before, I was talking to Susan, and she's, your mother is so effusive about me. She's so lovely. And
let's get something straight. My mom's a bigger fan of you than she is of me.
She's a bigger fan. I know. Your mother is definitely, hands down, a bigger fan of me than she is of you. And she talks like this to my mother. Oh, did you see what Randy did? This is your mother to my mother. Did you see Randy has a new video? He's did this, got a book. And my mother says to me, I don't know why she gives a shit about you. I tell her, Susan, your son's a movie star. Why do you give a shit about my kid?
Well, it is. It's weird and sort of like hurtful that I'm like existing in a shadow of you still, because I feel like she was a bigger fan of you in the revival of How to Eat Like a Child than she was of me, which is why I've continued to eat like a child, and you look svelte and magnificent.
I started eating like an adult. But you know what, Josh? You're always you self-deprecating like that. But you want to know something? This is your secret weapon, because you always play these kind of like, the comedic sidekick kind of like, well, now you're a leading man. But the conceit is that you're like this nebbishy guy. But your secret weapon is that you are extremely handsome.
Oh,
and I'm sure people have told you this, but you're very handsome.
You are incredibly sweet. The only person who's ever said those words to me is you.
Me?
I think,
on this podcast.
Moment, on this podcast. No, but self-deprecation it's a good tool, isn't it? I've used it since I was a wee lad, probably since we were going to Hollywood Playhouse together. But you're very kind to say that, and I don't lack self-confidence if that's what's in question.
Right.
I just lack self-discipline.
In what regard? You mean like?
Like I still eat like a child. But otherwise, I actually have started working out. And it's something I like to do every other year. That's good. Just sort of like do it and then stop for a while.
That's good. It's intermittent working out, annual intermittence. No, but just to do a little bit more about our childhood, I write about you in my book because I write, not to make this whole thing a commercial for me, but it's going to be.
Yeah.
But I write about I remember vividly rehearsing with you. Specifically, I talk about a rehearsal for Manhattan Magic. Do you remember that production?
Oh, do I ever.
And you sang a song. What was the song you sang in that? By the way, they would cobble together these like kind of like faux Broadway scripts and use existing songs from Broadway shows or do parodies. That's where I think I got my shtick from.
That was which Snooky Ookums? Was that
Yes.
Snooky Ookums?
Yes. It was Snooky Ookums, and I had the privilege to be on stage with you in that scene. And I remember rehearsing with you for the first time, and you committed in a way that I had never really seen.
I still remember that song. There's a married couple happily living in apartment 23. Wow.
Isn't that funny? Well, you committed and you were all over the place. And I remember thinking like, oh, this kid's a fucking weirdo.
Right.
But cut to, it worked out. I'm like, I later reflect on it. I'm like, oh, now I see what was happening there. But you were even then, so committed to the role.
We have similar sort of backstories, I think. And my parents got divorced when I was pretty young. And I learned early on that comedy was this sort of secret weapon that could cut through the heartache and the pain of the circumstances that life dealt us. And at the time, my mom in particular was going through a real bout of, sadness and obviously picking up the pieces of a dysfunctional marriage that she was a victim of. It was really interesting to sort of, and cliche, because I feel like so many comedians and performers find their way to this industry because of grief and loss. But it was one of those things where it was that commitment to making her smile that gave me, I think, this weird confidence to sort of be insane and crazy and go all the way.
It's always trying to get to our parents one way or another, right?
Right.
That's what my parents responded to. I say, my father especially, I always had a pretty healthy relationship with my mother. My father, I didn't feel seen unless I was on stage. And then when I was seen in that way, it was like I was put on a pedestal. I mean, it was fabulous. But yeah, it's all because we're broken.
Yeah, it's true.
I have a whole list of questions.
I want you to ask all of them, but I want you to prioritize them. I want them to go from most interesting to least interesting so that I know where we stand throughout the interview.
Josh, could you not give me chores to do on my podcast?
Yeah, that's fair.
First of all, this is not the first question, but I would be remiss not to discuss Wolf Like Me, which I just watched all of.
Thank you.
Mazel tov.
Thank you.
It's so great, Josh. And you're so, everything about it, there's so many things happening. It's a comedy, drama, horror, all the things I need. Mm-hmm. And you're fabulous in it, because not only are you funny as always, but you're emoting, and it's a real acting job for you. I've never seen you do before. Did you feel that way?
It was a great opportunity to sort of showcase a side of myself that I don't usually get to showcase. And the director, Abe Forsyth, he's a genius. I worked with him on a movie called Little Monsters that's bonkers with Lupita Nyong'o. And he sent me the script over quarantine and said the shoot's in about a month and a half in Australia. You would have to quarantine for 2 weeks by yourself and then leave your family for a subsequent 3 months in the midst of an ongoing pandemic. Do you want to join? And I immediately was like, it's a tough ask. Read the scripts, and within an hour called up my agents and said, I can't believe this, but I feel like I have to go do this. And it's just one of those things that you rarely read stuff that feels surprising or different. And this felt like just that. It felt completely unique. Isla Fisher, who I've been a fan of forever, being my co-star was something that really excited me. It feels refreshing in a way that I think hopefully gives audiences a chance to see me in a different light. I honed all of those skills at the Hollywood Playhouse of Performing Arts.
Watching me?
Yes, watching you in Filbert's Fantasies.
Oh my God, that I didn't remember that title. You just opened my floodgates.
Deep cut.
Holy shit. Filbert's Fantasies. What's another one?
What was the one where it was like we were like cowboys and it was like, I'm Dirty Dan, a nasty man.
I wasn't butch enough for that one. They put me in tights. I was the prince with the oranges.
Were you in Peter Pan?
I was Peter Pan, how dare you?
You were Peter Pan!
That was my very first.
I was Mr. Smee, right.
That was my first part.
You know what's incredible about that is you were probably the first male to ever play that role on stage. And
well, they weren't sure back then.
Yeah, well, but the history books should remember that and should account for that.
They should. I'm very underrated, Josh, as we'll get to.
I've always said you're the Kathy Rigby of your generation.
That's so nice. You're clearly inspired by film. I would say that you really kind of vision boarded your whole life. Would you say?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I grew up. You say I was inspired by film. We grew up, I think, in the golden age of blockbuster cinema, right? And so, our childhood was defined by these dream makers like Steven Spielberg, and at a young age, Seth Gable, who's my best friend, who you know, who also went to Hollywood Playhouse. The two of us would get together and we would make these movies, these at-home movies in the style of like E.T. or Indiana Jones. And it was highly influential. We also happened to grow up during this second golden age of Disney animation. So, growing up at a time in which things like Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin and Lion King were coming out, it was such a jumping off point for like all of the things that I sort of started to gravitate to as a performer. So in many ways, yes, I was... It wasn't necessarily a vision board so much as an opportunity to really embrace everything that was given to me as a viewer, as a spectator, and be inspired to in turn tap into those things that I fell in love with.
Do you remember the home video that we made? What movie we did? It was The Wizard of Oz.
Did we do The Wizard of Oz?
It was some of your greatest work. I'm kind of disappointed.
Wait a second. Where the hell is that tape?
I don't know. I was hoping you had it somewhere.
No, I got to ask my mom.
Okay, now speaking of films that you grew up with, obviously Princess Bride was one, and people want to know this because your performance as Fezzik in the reunion got a lot of praise. Was that one of the movies that kind of you lived for as a kid?
Oh, absolutely.
And did Andre the Giant have a defining influence on your career?
Well, not necessarily. It wasn't like I was like, I want to be a World Wrestling Federation star. But I really, movies like Princess Bride, movies like The Goonies, movies like Back to the Future, all of those were sort of just on repeat in my house, Wizard of Oz included. Like there were just certain movies that when we were growing up, they would always play them. And it was those, and in addition to that, all of the movies that we owned on VHS. And it would just be like rinse, cycle, repeat. So yeah, it was something that was definitely an inspiration. And I was so honored to get to play that role, not only to honor Andre the Giant's brilliant performance, but to play opposite all of the original actors, all of the original living actors from the movie was a next level dream come true.
So speaking of lines moving and things, Book of Mormon, first of all, you've been sort of teasing this revival, this comeback for you and Andrew. And frankly, we're sick of it. Is this happening or not? And if Andrew's not going to do it, I'm available. What the fuck?
Yeah, come do it.
Let's do it. What's the sitch?
The sitch is that, we have talked about it. Look, I think it's difficult for a number of reasons. I think it's not impossible, but I think, it's something that right now probably isn't immediately likely to happen, but maybe in the future. And it's not for lack of want. I just think it's the reality of the situation of how busy everyone is. And also, I think there was a moment prior to the pandemic where Andrew and I had actually, I think, come very close to coming back. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to surprise the audience. I wanted to literally come in for like a week, do a week of shows, give the money to charity, and peace out.
Without any sort of promotion or anything?
Without any promotion.
Oh yeah, good luck. I'm sure they'll love that.
I just thought it would have been so fun. We keep talking about something. Obviously, the show just celebrated 10 years, and it's a testament to the brilliance of Trey and Matt and everybody involved, including Bobby Lopez, that 10 years on, it's still at capacity. It's still a show that is thriving. And, it still feels like there's an opportunity at some point for us to commemorate our time in the show. And I'll leave it at that. I think that no doors ever closed. And more than anything, I was genuinely curious how people felt about the possibility and was honestly overwhelmed by the response. I mean, like 400,000 people immediately liking the tweet and being like, yes, yes, yes. It was a reminder of the power of that brilliant satire that I think people would love the opportunity to see the original cast do.
It is brilliant satire. Am I right that they've changed in the 10 years? They've since changed some of the book to better reflect the current state of the world that we're in? The bigger question is, because I think about this with like even Avenue Q and shows that push the envelope so much. Did they change it?
To be honest, I don't know. I haven't seen the show.
Well, maybe you should read the script before you go do it again.
I should read the new script.
Yeah.
From my understanding, they did make changes that reflected, I think, the decade that's passed since the show originally came out. And I believe they worked with the current cast to sort of implement those changes, which I think is great. I don't know what those changes are. I'm very curious to see it.
Where do you even begin with a show like that? Because it's such broad satire, and it's so, it's so irreverent. I'm always on the fence about what I think about stuff like that. And I never want to say like, yes, we should totally rewrite everything. Everything should totally fit in line with where we are culturally now, because I think it's the job of satire, especially, to kind of ignore those lines for the sake of blowing them up comedically. There's no joy in offending people and upsetting people either.
Well, it's a very interesting question. I think you're right to a certain extent that like something like Blazing Saddles, for instance, it's a masterpiece, but it was made at a different time and needs to be looked at under the prism of the time that it was made at, right? Whereas something that's a living, breathing, continuing satire, I think there is room for evolution. Like, I certainly think it's appropriate if something is continuing to be represented through live performance to make changes that feel relevant. And also, like, what a cool opportunity to sort of have it grow, have it evolve. I've always sort of been struck by the oddness, I guess, of shows that like are so steadfast in this is what was done in 1933, and this is like, I saw Carousel recently, and I love Carousel, and I don't want to get into a fight about Carousel with you because I know you'll defend Carousel till your dying breath.
Maybe we should skip this part.
Yes, we should. But
no, go ahead.
That was an example of something that I felt like, oh, wouldn't it be interesting if somebody were to update this book, right? Like, or even seeing West Side Story. I was really blown away by what Tony Kushner did subtly, but nevertheless effectively, to tell this story we're all familiar with in a way that feels more apropos. And I welcome that. There was a while that I was hoping to do a revival of Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, which is one of my favorite shows of all time. There's stuff in that show that's tough. And like, there's stuff in that show that's great. And there's stuff in that show that is sort of like eye-opening because it's again of a different time. Do you literally do it as a museum piece, or do you embrace the opportunity to sort of even subversively deal with some of the stuff in there that is, questionable towards women, questionable towards I always think that there's an opportunity for these things to continuously be living, breathing entities. I don't think you have to always feel so trapped. Even the most treasured masterpieces in the pantheon of theater.
Agreed. It's interesting because it's different with comedy. The answer is somewhere there in the ether. The one thing, talk about my mother, who really called me for an hour to talk about you, was when she recently saw you on Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Dream come true. I had gotten a call. I had been asked to do another episode of Curb a while ago, and I couldn't do it because of scheduling. And I was so heartbroken because I think that Larry David may be the funniest human being on earth. And I get a call in the midst of the pandemic, and Larry goes, "Hey, Josh, listen, I want you to come and do this thing on my show." And I said, I'll do anything for you. I'm a little concerned about COVID because I haven't been vaccinated yet because I didn't qualify. And he goes, Josh, the median age on our show is 75. Trust me, you're going to be fine. So with that, it became the first thing I did during the pandemic. And what was so refreshing about it and what was so fun is usually guest stars on that show are the foil comedically to Larry David. And what was so nice is I had that rare opportunity to actually embrace Larry's advice. And that was the impetus for the comedy, which I thought was so refreshing and different. And I just loved it. And you know, he's one of those people that just, every idea that comes out of his mouth is inspired. And it's sort of like every time you're on a set, specifically when you're not a regular cast member, it's a trust exercise with all of the moving parts of this, long living thing. And on Curb, it's such an easy trust exercise because you know you're in the best possible hands. And they were just so welcoming and so incredibly generous.
And what was the process for you? I mean, as far as script versus what you improv?
You basically don't get a script per se. You get like an outline of what the scene is going to be. And Larry and the writer and director sort of like work through the shape of it. But then there's so much room for freedom. What was really funny, and I've told this story before, is I had the most Curb Your Enthusiasm experience shooting Curb Your Enthusiasm because that morning I had the worst backache. And it's like 5 a.m., one of those dreadful calls. And I grabbed 3 pills, popped them, went to work, and started feeling really weird. And I called my wife and I said, can you take a look at what is next to the bed? The Advil. She goes, yeah, I'm looking at it. And I go, okay, is it just Advil? She goes, yeah, but it's Advil PM.
Oh, you son of a bitch. That's my worst nightmare ever, that I will one day do that. You lived it.
I took 3 Advil PM before shooting Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Oh, Jesus Christ. That is so appropriate.
There was no amount of coffee that could solve my crisis that day. So I felt like I was literally floating on another plane. But it was perfect for the role and for that show.
You'd never know. What was the fitting experience like? For those who haven't seen the episode, with the underwear.
Yeah, I wear possibly the most questionable underwear in the history of television.
Did you have a say in how holy they were?
No, that came out of Larry's twisted brain. As Spielberg frames a shot, so too does Larry frame the number of holes in underwear that his comedic centerpiece has to involve. And I walked into my trailer and I was told to try them on, and there were literally 3 pairs because they were so flimsy and frail that I think that they thought there was a good chance that I would break all 3 of them with my lumbering ass. Yeah, it was an interesting process. I then got one of those nudity waivers, which I knew sort of like the writing on the wall represented some really questionable shit to come. But like my lawyer sent me a nudity waiver for Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Was that your first one?
No, I've done nudity before, but I didn't imagine shooting Curb that I would need a nudity waiver. No.
When did you do nudity before? For those of us who would like to Google image after we leave this podcast.
For those of you looking to have nightmare fuel for the rest of your life, I've done nudity in a few films, strangely. I don't know why. I did it in Love and Other Drugs.
That's right. I remember that. I was a little busy looking at Jiggle Balls, if you don't mind.
Love and Other Drugs was like the hair of its generation. It was just everybody in that cast sort of needed to be nude for some reason.
Right.
I did it. What else did I do? Frozen. I did it in Frozen.
You were pantsless. I know. Full frontal.
Thanks for sharing. I don't know. There's a couple.
So the pandemic didn't really seem to slow you down. Other than, I mean, you had the kind of Jewish anxiety that we all had for a time, but you worked a lot through it. How would you say overall this experience that we've just gone through and kind of are coming out of affected you, impacted you creatively?
Well, first of all, I think it's been both a really horrific experience and also, in a weird way, a blessing for me. I'm constantly going. I'm constantly working, and I never take the time to just stop. And I had really missed the opportunity to just have time with my children and my family. And it was sort of the proverbial silver lining of a really horrible, unprecedented event. From a personal perspective, it was sort of a blessing in disguise to get the better part of a year to just be with my kids and to just embrace the perfection that are my two daughters and my amazing wife. From a professional standpoint, it was really interesting because there weren't many opportunities. So you had to sort of create an opportunity to do something that gave you a sense of value. And I saw all this suffering around me. And I saw at first kids who were really struggling to understand a world in which they couldn't go to school, in which they couldn't socialize with their friends. And I picked up a book one day and I just started reading to them with silly voices and doing this and was blown away by the response and by the joy that it provided so many people. And then I saw that need as school became digital, became less and less of a need. And I wanted to still do something. And so I pivoted to this idea called Reunited Apart, which was sort of self-serving in a way because I love movies and I love reunions. And I thought, well, hell, everybody's stuck at home. Let's give people a bit of joy and in the process raise some money for those people who need it. And so I started to reunite casts like Back to the Future, Goonies, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Lord of the Rings, Wayne's World. And in so doing that, raised quite a lot of money for causes that really needed it at their most desperate and during a really scary time. And so that was really gratifying, Randy. Like that period, as chaotic as it was and as uncertain as it was it became an opportunity to do something that I'm really proud of and really so grateful that so many people to this day come up to me and say, you don't know how much Reunited Apart got me through that dark time. So it was tough, but it was also, I think, productive.
Your family is so beautiful. Your kids are so gorgeous. What is it like to be a dad who's a Disney icon? Do the kids care as much as I would imagine they do, or do they not give a shit?
If my character that I played was Maribel or Bruno, I think they'd care more. You know, I think that they're as fickle as the winds and have moved on to Encanto at this point. But they love me and love my love of all things film. So that I have sort of made them mini-me's. And one other thing that came out of COVID was broadening their pop cultural horizons. So I introduced them to movies that I probably shouldn't have, like Breakfast Club. I made my oldest daughter watch Rain Man the other day, which was a questionable choice. Billy Madison, Happy Gilmore, just the things I grew up on. And it is cliche to say, but they are the most important things in my life. And being able to share sort of the things I love with them is a dream come true.
I thought I was the most important thing in your life.
Second to you.
Okay. Thank you for that. That was lovely. Lovely talking to you. I love you so much.
I love you.
And Now the show is over, girls, so thanks for listening. It's been a vibe, and damn it, don't you dare forget to subscribe. I promise next week will be 10 times better than even the last. Except when it's not. God, I love you, Josh Gad. I have since we were 13. And if you do Frozen 3, I'm available, queen. And that's the last word of the podcast.